Okay, I'm going to read you from the collected poems of Lenore Kendal. This is the introduction. Poetry is never compromise. It is a manifestation, translation of a vision, an illumination, an experience. If you compromise your vision, you become a blind poet. No, prophet, a blind prophet. There is no point today in that poetry which exists mainly as an exercise in dexterity. Craft is valuable insofar as it serves as a brilliant midwife for clarity, beauty, vision. When it becomes enamored of itself, it produces word masturbation. The poems I write are concerned with all aspects of the creature and of that total universe through which he moves. The aim is toward the increase of awareness. It may be awareness of the way a bird shatters the sky with his flight, or awareness of the difficulty and necessity of trust, or awareness of the desire for awareness, and also the fear of awareness. This may work through beauty or shock or laughter, but the direction is always toward clear sight, both interior and exterior. This demands honesty within the poet and the poem, an honesty sometimes joyful and sometimes painful, whether to the poet or the reader or both. Two poems of mine published as a small book deal with physical love and the invocation, recognition, and acceptance of the divinity in man through the medium of physical love. In other words, it feels good. It feels so good that you can step outside your private ego and share the grace of the universe. This simple and rather self-evident statement, enlarged and exampled poetically, raised a furor difficult to believe. A large part of the furor was caused by the poetic usage of certain four-letter words of Anglo-Saxon origin instead of the substitution of gentle euphemisms. This brings up the question of poetic language. Whatever is language is poetic language, and if the word required by the poet does not exist in his own language, then it is up to him to discover it. The only proviso can be that the word be the correct word as demanded by the poem, and only the poet can be the ultimate judge of that. Euphemisms chosen by fear are a covenant with hypocrisy and will immediately destroy the poem and eventually destroy the poet. Any form of censorship, whether mental, moral, emotional, or physical, whether from the outside out or the inside in, is a barrier against self-awareness. Poetry is alive because it is a medium of vision and experience. It is not necessarily comfortable. It is not necessarily safe. Poetry has moved out of the classroom and into the street, and thus brought about a flow of cross-pollination, many of the fruits of which are viable in both mediums. Academia tended to breed the fear of offence, i.e., that which might offend someone. Visions and language both were often dwarfed and muted. The poem, too, often becoming a vehicle for literary gymnastics. Street poetry avoids the fear trap, but too often loses its vision through a lack of clarity, through sloppiness, through a lack of the art of the craft. Poetry as poetry has no need to be classified in either of the above pigeonholes, nor in any other. It exists. It cannot exist in the company of censorship. When a poet censors his vision, he no longer tells the truth as he sees it. When he censors the language of the poem, he does not use those words which to him are the most perfect words to be used. This self-stunting results in an artificial limitation imposed on an art whose direction is beyond the limits of the conceivable. There are no barriers to poetry or prophecy. By their nature, they are barrier breakers, bursts of perceptions, lines into infinity. If a poet lies about his vision, he lies about himself and in himself. This produces a true barrier. When a poet, through fearful expediency, uses language other than that which is perfect to the poem, he becomes a person of fearful expendency. When an outside agency takes it upon itself to attempt the censorship of poetry, it is censoring the acceptance of truth and the leap toward revelation. When a society becomes afraid of its poets, it is afraid of itself. A society afraid of itself stands as another definition of hell. A poem that is written and published becomes available to those who choose to read it. This seems to me to imply one primary responsibility on the part of the poet, that he tell the truth as he sees it, that he tell it as beautifully, as amazingly as he can, that he ignite his own sense of wonder, that he work alchemy within the language. These are the form and existence of poetry itself. A good part of the audience for modern poetry is young. We move in a world where the polarities and possibilities of life and death exist as constant consciousness. Once the concept and availability of overkill was made public knowledge, the aura of the possibility of cosmic death became visible. There have been eras when the young could slip softly into their elders' lives, when if they wanted to, ignore the deeper issues of humanity, of man's relationship to man. It was made easy for them. This is not such a time. And the choices of the young are deep and hard. At 18, the young men must decide whether they will enter into the national pastime of death. A great many of the young are choosing to manifest a different way of life, one motivated toward pleasure, toward enlightenment, and toward mutual concern, instead of accepting the world of war and personal despair which has been offered them by the majority of their elders. These are heavy choices to make, and there is no avoidance possible. Those who read modern poetry do so for pleasure, for insight, sometimes for counsel. The least they can expect is that the poet who shares his visions and experiences with them do so with no hypocrisy. To compromise poetry through expendency is the soft, small murder to the soul. This is the introduction to Lenore Kendal's book of collected poems, San Francisco. This was written in 1967. Collected poems. Let's see if I have the courage to read you the first poem. God, love poem. There are no ways of love but beautiful. I love you, all of them. I love you. Your cock in my hand stirs like a bird in my fingers as you swell and grow hard in my hand, forcing my fingers open with your rigid strength. You are beautiful. You are beautiful. You are 100 times beautiful. I stroke you with my loving hands, pink-nailed long fingers. I caress you. I adore you. My fingertips, my palms. Your cock rises and throbs in my hands. A revelation as Aphrodite knew it. There was a time when gods were purer. I can recall nights among the honeysuckle, our juices sweeter than honey. We were the temple and the god entire. I am naked against you, and I put my mouth to you slowly. I have longing to kiss you, and my tongue makes worship on you. You are beautiful. Your body moves to me, flesh to flesh, skin sliding over golden skin, as mine to yours, my mouth, my tongue, my hands, my belly and my legs against your mouth, your love, sliding, sliding. Our bodies move and join unbearably. Your face above me is the face of all the gods and beautiful demons. Your eyes, love touches love. The temple and the god are one.